Harvest ritual. The bonfire roared to life, its inferno stretching skyward, clawing at the obsidian night. The fire's unsettling radiance danced across the faces of the women who encircled it, their identities obscured by hoods decorated with crow feathers. Their silhouettes flickered like ghostly apparitions against the fiery backdrop. A potent cocktail of sage and wood smoke permeated the air, a scent so thick you could almost taste its bitter tang on your tongue. It served as a shroud to mask an undercurrent of decay, a smell reminiscent of rotting leaves forgotten beneath the winter snow. The monotonous drone of chanting filled my ears, weaving an eerie melody that gnawed at my subconscious and stirred an instinctive discomfort deep within me. This gathering was not a joyful celebration of autumn's bounty, but something far more sinister. Amongst them stood one woman apart from the rest. Her face was etched with deep lines, each wrinkle bearing witness to her many winters. Underneath the moonlight, her eyes gleamed like shards of ice floating in dark water. Bereft of warmth or empathy, they bore into me with a predatory spark that hinted at something ancient and primal. A cold knot formed in my gut, gnawing at me from inside. I had unwittingly stumbled upon a ritualistic invocation. These women weren't thanking nature for its plentiful harvest, but instead made offerings to an ancient entity whose name had long been forgotten by time. Their chants became whispers that coursed down my spine. The earth quaked, pulsing in time with their rhythmic incantations. The flames surged higher still, twisting and writhing as though manipulated by unseen hands. A low groan emanated from below, and the wind howled through the nearby gravestones, their epitaphs eroded by time. Terror surged within me like a tidal wave, a primal fear that heightened my senses and caused every hair on my body to stand on end. A serpentine presence emerged from the thick smoke, materializing from the shadows as though woven from moonbeams and pure evil. It glowed with an eerie luminescence as it glided like a predator stalking its prey. The gathering reached its climax as the women responded with terrifying joy. Their bodies moved in an unnatural dance, their limbs twisting and contorting in fluid motions reminiscent of serpents. Their faces twisted into grotesque masks of ecstasy, their eyes wide and wild with fierce delight. Panic gripped me, choking off the scream that clawed at my throat. I wanted to run but was rooted to the spot as if some unseen force held me captive. I was mesmerized by the spectacle unfolding before me. The shadowy figure wrapped itself around the woman with the icy eyes. She didn't flinch or gasp. Instead, she remained calm, her demeanor eerily peaceful amidst the chaos. Her body floated above the fire, encased in a halo of luminescent light as she embraced the malevolent entity invading her body. A glowing symbol materialized on her forehead, an ancient rune whose meaning was lost to time, but seemed terrifyingly significant at that moment. She glanced up, and her eyes shone brighter than before. The grin etched on her face wasn't one of happiness, but rather grim satisfaction. Suddenly all chanting ceased, and everything was still, save for the crackling embers dying in the bonfire, which now burned with an unearthly green glow. She moved toward me just as the earth cracked open, revealing a dark abyss below. This gathering wasn't about celebrating grains or livestock. It marked something far more ominous, the beginning of something monstrous that threatened to swallow the world whole. I could only stand there, a silent witness to the birth of a horrific new era. My soul had been offered up as an unwitting sacrifice, and all I could do was watch helplessly as the night ushered me into eternal damnation. The crunch of leaves underfoot was the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the forest. We should have turned back hours ago when the narrow trail started fading away, but my friend insisted we keep going until we found the perfect campsite. Now, as darkness smothered the dense trees around us, I realized how foolish we'd been. I messed up, I confessed under my breath, fumbling in my bag for the flashlight. The feeble glow of its light wavered, barely penetrating the crushing blackness. Something's wrong. Jake's chuckle bounced off the surrounding trees, his boots crunching on the leaf-covered trail as he strolled past me. "Scaredy cat," he mocked, his voice a comforting break from the silence. "This is our way." I let out an exhausted sigh and trailed after him with reluctance. Noel and Chris seemed to share my unease. The crack of a twig made us freeze in our tracks. There was a rustling sound nearby. "Maybe we should set up camp here," Noel suggested, her voice quivering slightly. "No way," Jake retorted. "We're not sleeping in wolf territory. Stay quiet and keep moving." A chill ran down my spine. Something was off about these woods. But Jake was drawn to danger. Rash and spontaneous, he always managed to lead us into precarious situations. So like hundreds of times before, we followed him. After some time, we noticed a small clearing up ahead. "See? Perfect spot," Jake declared, halting abruptly as his flashlight illuminated an ancient cabin cloaked in moss and nearly consumed by nature itself. "What is that?" Chris stuttered. I squinted at the side of the crumbling structure, spotting something shiny near a half-open cellar door. "How did this—" My question was interrupted by a spine-chilling moan. It sounded human but warped. We spun around, frantically attempting to locate the source of the sound. Then we saw it. A massive figure shrouded in the fog, striding right toward us. A putrid scent came. It made my eyes tear up and my stomach revolt. Noel screamed. I yelled, "Run!" grabbing Jake's arm and yanking him back toward our path. It was too late. The monstrous creature spotted us and charged toward us on all fours. Its powerful muscles rippled beneath its matted fur, propelling it at a terrifying speed. My heart raced as its heavy footsteps echoed through the forest like a drumbeat. In a frenzy of fear, we sprinted through the dense underbrush. Chris's flashlight beam bobbed over the rugged terrain and fallen logs in our path. The darkness seemed to swallow us whole as we plunged deeper into the forest, our only hope to outrun the beast behind us. We ran for what seemed like hours, my lungs seared with each breath, and my muscles screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. The thought of being caught by the monster behind us was too terrifying. We zigzagged through the trees, branches whipping at our faces and thorns scratching our skin. The ground beneath us was slick with mud and leaves, making it difficult to maintain our footing. Behind me, my friends struggled to keep up. I closed my eyes and willed myself to run faster. We came to an ancient stone chamber. Not exactly safe, but it would have to do for now. The remnants of a wooden door on rusted hinges were the only thing separating the ominous structure from the outside world. We entered the building, huddling close to one another for comfort and warmth. Above, stray beams of moonlight slipped through a grated opening. In the faint light from a hidden crack, my nightmare slowly came into view. A large trough stretched across the chamber until it turned into a rusted mining cart filled with horrifying contents. Skulls peeking through masses of coagulated tissue, severed limbs piled on top of one another in a gruesome display of desecration. As shock gave way to horrifying realization, I noticed mounds surrounding the cart pulsating rhythmically with raspy echoes, breathing mounds made up of decomposing flesh soaked in blood. Countless they were. A terrifying sea of semi-animate remains groaning in either pain or hunger. I couldn't tell which. They writhed and tore at one another. That gurgling sound that had haunted me from the woods was back, tortured death cries mixed with a sickening sloshing that made the terror so much worse than before. We'd unwittingly taken refuge in a vile slaughterhouse. Drawing a deep breath, I was assaulted by the overpowering stench of decay that instantly churned my insides. My hands instinctively flew to my face, shielding my mouth and nose in an attempt at blocking out the nauseating smell. But it was to no avail. The lingering odor had already taken hold, embedding itself stubbornly within my senses. The heap of horror's attention shifted toward me as if drawn by some monstrous appetite. Pieces of rotten flesh fell away, only to be replaced instantly by regenerating viscera and squirming blood-soaked muscle. Survival instinct kicked in. I clawed my way back to the door. Skeletal fingers reached out from the churning sea of decay, tearing away chunks of flesh as they sought leverage. A monstrous hand broke through the surface ahead, its filthy nails scraping dangerously close to my face as it struggled to pull itself into this realm. I froze when a skull surfaced next, sinew and veined flesh weaving itself across the exposed bone, eyelids unfurling to reveal hollow, lifeless pits. Overcome by fear, I threw myself against the warped wooden door in a desperate attempt to escape. The old wood splintered under my force and momentum, sending me sprawling onto the cold, hard ground. Panting heavily, I squinted through teary eyes at the cavernous underworld before me. The air was thick with the stench of rot and something sickly sweet. An unusual radiance created lengthy, distorted shadows across an expansive maze of roots and deep crevices that appeared to tunnel into the earth's molten heart. The cave walls were damp with a shimmering substance that emitted a mild odor of iron and decay, reflecting the peculiar light in ways that played tricks on our sight. My comrades emerged from my rear, their expressions echoing my astonishment as they absorbed the immense subterranean realm we had stumbled upon. Chris's voice trembled and faltered as he queried, Where are we?" The spectral light throbbed once like a pulse before it intensified, lighting up the moist cave walls. Unnerving symbols and figures had been inscribed in a blood-red fluid that imparted a metallic flavor in my mouth when I unconsciously licked my lips. They were unsettling combinations of human forms, intertwined with monstrous beasts. Abruptly, a low rumble reverberated below us, vibrating through our footwear and rattling us to our very core. A startling sound followed that sent shivers down my spine. The creature was back. It inhaled deeply to pick up my scent, then opened its mouth wide. It let out a sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. More skeletal heads appeared from the swirling darkness. I attempted to free myself, but sharp claws dug into my legs, slicing through my jeans and scraping against my skin. A stronger stench of decay filled the air, making me gag as it invaded my nostrils and mouth. Decomposed fingers, their tendons exposed like frayed wires, fumbled under my clothes in an eager attempt at dragging me further into the terrifying dark. I twisted and jerked violently, but for each hand I managed to shake off. Another 3 replaced it. The relentless assault closed in from all sides with the restless force of countless tormented spirits. The sickening smell of rot and dried blood filled my nose, choking me. I knew I was going to die here, in this horrible place. A desperate call for help left my mouth, echoing into the empty silence. Death. It was too complex an idea for someone my age, an unexpected visitor I'd never thought to encounter so soon. I'd never experienced the loss of a loved one. I didn't know what to do. Should I pray or prepare myself for the end? My heart raced, each beat a signal of the looming danger. The atmosphere was loaded with unspoken words and unrealized dreams. The encroaching darkness reached out for me, and I stood on the edge of nothingness with only despair for company. Alone, abandoned, afraid. As darkness engulfed me, a cold sensation dragged me deeper into the abyss. My hand brushed against something hard and round, a skull hidden in the grime. Just before my vision was completely obscured by rotting flesh, I heard my friend's terrified screams for the last time, drowned out by countless decaying voices. The empty was cold and damp, pressing in from all sides and stealing my breath. An endless expanse stretched before me, filled with constant pressure and a transformation more frightening than death itself. I attempted to call for help, for mercy, for an end to this nightmare. But the only sound that returned was the continuous moans of lost souls sighing in the dark tomb. And somewhere within that haunting noise, my pained cries eventually found their voice. Distorted visions. Dragging my suitcase onto an unclean bed, I felt fatigue seeping into my bones. The dim light barely helped as I groped for the switch. A flicker in the overhead bulb lit up reluctantly, throwing a dull yellow glow on the flaky wallpaper and a carpet with an unsettling stain. Dismissing a sudden chill, I turned my attention to the nightstand. A Gideon Bible lay there, its cover weathered by time and disregard. It fell open to reveal a hastily written warning. Beware of management. They're aware. My skin tightened. This secluded mountain lodge was far from the peaceful retreat I sought. The note unsettled me. I attempted to disregard it as a joke, but the unease lingered. Sleep came quickly but was filled with disturbing dreams. When morning arrived, the carpet stain was more noticeable in the daylight. I brought up my concerns to Silas, the lodge manager. His dismissive response did nothing to ease my worries. The lodge was unusually quiet, but Silas chalked it up to being off-peak. The day passed in a surreal silence, broken only by the wind outside. I spent my time exploring the large building and its many rooms. As evening approached, I ventured into the nearby woods. The fog rolled in, obscuring the path. I felt alone. My phone provided a measure of light until the battery began to die. A sudden scream sounded, causing a ripple of fear to surge within me. The sound was not that of an animal. It was something far more menacing. Panicked, I ran back to the lodge, slamming the door shut behind me. I collapsed into a chair in the lobby. Another scream echoed from upstairs. I grabbed a fireplace poker and climbed the staircase. The air grew colder with each step, and there was a faint metallic smell wafting in the air. Upstairs, I found utter chaos, furniture overturned and clothes strewn about on the blood-soaked carpets. But what horrified me most was seeing the body of a dead woman lying on the floor. Fear gave way to survival, and escape became my priority. I hurriedly packed my belongings. Silas's cold voice sounded behind me. "Leaving so soon?" He smiled unnervingly, his eyes glowing an eerie shade of orange. What the hell was going on here? A tidal wave of recollection swept over me, nearly knocking me off my feet. The crimson stain of blood, the absence of other guests, the chill from the unlit fireplace. Something dreadful had happened at this isolated lodge. Silas sprang at me like a feral beast, his gnarled fingers clawing through the air. With adrenaline pumping like molten fire in my veins, I fled into the tangle of hallways. Silas's guttural snarls ricocheted off the cold walls, each echo reminding me of the predator hot on my heels. Survival was not just a goal now. It was a primal need that drowned out all other thoughts. I had to get out of there. A sudden memory hit me hard. The grand hall with its unused fireplace. It gave me a sliver of hope. I dashed through the huge wooden doors, Silas close behind. Time was running out. I toppled over an end table, the lamp on top providing a much-needed distraction that would buy me seconds at most. Silas stumbled, briefly thrown off by the obstacle. Seizing this opportunity, I grabbed the fire poker and slammed the heavy iron grate shut, trapping a log inside the stone hearth. My plan was a gamble and banked on the old tales of fire cleansing evil. A roar filled the room as flames engulfed the trapped log. Silas instinctively recoiled, an unholy light from the blaze forcing him to let out an agonized howl. He hammered at his flaming prison with monstrous force, managing to bend it but failing to snuff out its burning heart. His furious bellows turned into spine-tingling screams as he shrank and dissolved into dark wisps that were swallowed by a fiery whirlwind. The grate fell open, remnants of charred wood still glowing from inside it. A heavy silence settled around me as a wave of exhaustion hit, causing my legs to give way beneath me. I fell onto the old wooden boards. As shock faded, disgust washed over me, coupled with a grim reality. I had witnessed and narrowly escaped a horrifying ritual. Daylight poured through the dirty windows as I stumbled out of the great hall. Biting mountain winds tore at my skin. Silas was gone, consumed by fire, but his evil home remained. I followed the winding mountain trail, unmoved by the beautiful views around me. Snow-capped peaks accented the soft pink hues of the sunrise. It felt like a cruel mockery after what I had endured. While the authorities dismissed my story, they couldn't ignore the deserted lodge and its dead resident. Their official conclusion was an accidental death caused by a tragic gas leak. Typical. But I knew better. That lodge was a tomb and gateway to unimaginable evil. In the coming weeks, nightmares haunted me relentlessly. Snippets of the ritual, images of Silas's monstrous form. I am constantly reminded of the hidden evil and the unsettling fact that there are beings beyond our understanding waiting to enter our world. The experience has left a lasting mark on my soul. And though I survived, I am forever changed and always on guard. Grotesque Shadows. In the dim, candlelit room, the coven leader's features contorted into a chilling grin. The flickering flame threw sharp, dancing shadows across her face, etched with the scars of countless moonlit rites. Her normally lifeless eyes blazed an unsettling emerald. An unseen energy swelled within the cabin walls, prickling my skin and escalating my fear to near hysteria. Her hands raised, she uttered syllables in an alien tongue I could not decipher. My gaze swept over the area. Sinister figures skulked in each corner, their faces concealed but their malevolent intent tangible. At the heart of a chalk-drawn circle, fire spat and hissed, casting grotesque shadows on the wooden walls. But what seized my attention was not the fire but what our leader cradled, a wax effigy bearing my likeness. As her chanting escalated, the statue seemed to soften, its face warping until it mimicked my horrified grimace. Dread washed over me as I realized that I wasn't merely observing some ritual. I was its epicenter. The coven had deceived me into providing them with strands of my hair, which they now used to imbue the effigy, power enough to torment me beyond human endurance. Each twitch of the waxy figure sent jolts of pain radiating throughout my body, wrenching screams from my throat that were swallowed by the coven leader's ongoing incantation. With a forceful thrust, she plunged the melting wax figure into the flames. As it liquefied, a searing pain ripped through me, clouding my sight and buckling my knees. I crumpled onto the floor like a marionette severed from its strings. Silence blanketed the cabin save for the snapping fire and my ragged gasps for air. The coven leader loomed over me, her green eyes glinting with savage satisfaction. "The curse is cast," she rasped icily. "Your pain nourishes us. Your suffering is our triumph." A horrifying epiphany dawned on me. My blind faith in these shadowy practitioners had been my undoing. I was trapped, every wince and whimper only strengthening their sinister spells. But as their frosty laughter reverberated around me, a second realization dawned. This wasn't the finale but a foreboding commencement. Guffaws bounced off the timber walls, then petered out into the night. The coven's matriarch knelt, her garments gathering at her feet like a shadowy specter. She delved into her pocket and pulled out a vial, its contents twinkling with an ethereal luminescence. My hand trembled as she thrust the vial into my grasp. "Consume this," she commanded. "It will tether you to us, amplify your torment." Terror gnawed at my insides, yet survival dictated compliance. I tilted back the vial. The icy liquid trickled down my throat before it blazed, scorching me like a rampant wildfire. The world whirled. Constellations exploded in my sight and sweat purled on my forehead. Agony seared every nerve. The coven's laughter pealed out again, a jarring symphony that reveled in my suffering. Yet amidst this torture, something kindled within me. Resilience twining with dread sparked a rebellion. I pushed myself onto unsteady knees, despite my blurred vision and the burning pain. The leader's laughter choked abruptly as she registered my defiant posture. Astonishment flickered in her eyes. "Unthinkable," she murmured. I bellowed, rising to my feet, standing tall against the anguish. My heart hammered fiercely, the adrenaline fueling my fortitude. Locking eyes with her, I registered her momentary shock as silence blanketed the room. An unrecognizable energy throbbed within me, wild and uncontrolled but undeniably mine. A savage beast of anguish clawed incessantly at the fabric of my sanity. I trudged forward, each step a silent defiance against the crippling agony. The leader's face contorted from surprise to a steely determination as she registered my approach. The chanting resumed, her voice weaving with the discordant symphony of her coven. Their chants reverberated in the wooden belly of the cabin, crafting an eerie serenade. Beneath my skin, a dormant wellspring of power awoke. It reacted to their incantations as if called by name. Unbidden, my hand reached out for the spectral chain, a tether woven with suffering but now humming with untapped energy. It pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, tying me to them like a live wire. Survival, an ancient instinct embedded in our genetic code, propelled me to yank the ghostly lifeline. The collective might of the coven surged into me. A gasp rippled through them as they felt their life force drain, their chants stuttering into silence. Shock, fear, and disbelief reflected on the coven members' faces. The leader reeled backward, her eyes wide and bulging as she tasted the bitter backlash of her malevolent magic. The ghostly link between us sparked in the darkness, pulsing with raw power as our energies tangled. I poured all my defiance into this supernatural force, seeking a way to break the bond. The effigy in the fire continued melting away, but each drop of wax marked a victory for me. The coven leader clawed at her throat, gasping for air. She sank to her knees, coughing and wheezing, expelling a thick black substance from her mouth. I would afford her no mercy. With clenched teeth and unyielding resolve, I gave one final tug at our spectral bond, drawing all of their energy into myself. A brilliant arc of power shot through me, overwhelming my senses. A triumphant roar escaped from deep within me, drowning out their cries of despair. It ended. The bond snapped, and the rush of energy dispersed in a shockwave that bounced off the cabin walls, extinguishing the fire and plunging the room into darkness. Silence, broken only by my ragged breathing and the occasional whimper from a defeated coven member. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I surveyed the figures huddled on the floor, once formidable foes, now pitiful shadows. Victory. The cooling wax sizzled, drawing my attention back to what remained of the effigy. Its melted form bore no resemblance to me. A grim satisfaction swelled within me. I had faced down my tormentors and emerged victorious. A bone-chilling scream sounded, sending my heart into a palpable pounding inside my chest. It was followed by an unsettling silence that put my nerves on edge. As I ventured out into the night and deeper into the darkness, an unanticipated dread washed over me. The darkness around me shifted, taking on strange shapes. Suddenly, two bright red eyes cut through the blackness, staring directly at me. I shivered. Before I could react, the monstrous figure lunged at me from the shadows. I attempted to flee, but my legs refused to obey, rooted to the ground as fear tightened its grip. The creature closed in with an unnatural speed and agility, unusual for something of its size. It extended its claws toward me. Frozen with terror, I could only watch as it bore down on me. The last thing I remember, before everything went black, was its terrifying roar ringing in my ears and the hot gust of its breath against my face.